Today we're going to discuss the unnamed founding father they don't want you to know about on today's Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. Was that clickbaity? Yeah, that was a little clickbaity. That's what I'm thinking too over here. How you guys doing? My name's Charles Ray Dawson. I'm the Associate Broker and Residential Sales Manager at ProStar Realty. This is the Unnamed Real Estate Podcast, episode 178. And I'm recording this on July the 3rd because tomorrow I plan to do very little real estate stuff. All right? And, every once in a while, it's going to fall on a holiday. You guys might remember this from Thanksgiving. I tried to do something really short and get it out there so I can keep my record of 178 straight weeks of always dropping something on Thursday, whether or not it's watched or not. It gives me some time to kick back, do something fun, and research some stuff. So what we got going on in the world today? We have 4th of July coming up where everybody gets together, blows up some fireworks, eat some hot dogs and stuff. We see a whole bunch of articles about how much your July 4th barbecue is going to cost this year compared to last year, the year before. And as always, we have the two competing narratives going, most expensive 4th of July ever. No, it's the bestest ever, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think at this point in the election year, we all know what I'm talking about. But your mileage may vary. The movie you watch on that screen might be different than the movie I'm seeing on that screen. All right, but we're not going to discuss that today. We're going to discuss real estate. Keep it in my scope. All right, and we're just going to start off with the numbers to get these out of the way. So, numbers for July 3rd, 2024. Actives this week are 17,750, down 211 from the week before. Our new listings were at 1,939, up 87. Our contracts were at 2,135, down 65. Our closings last week were 2,195. And coming soon to an MLS near you is 541 new listings. All right, our supply stayed the same at 74.6 with little change. All right, demand went down a little bit to 75.5. That gives us a Cromford report number for the MLS as a whole at 102.5. We're in a balanced market. Now, let's see how our regional areas are going. I'm seeing a lot of red. Let's start with the gainers. Okay, Avondale's up 8 from last month, all right, and holding the number 3 slot is at 162.4. Definitely a seller's market. And Queen Creek and Maricopa are still creeping up, all right, and they are still in a buyer's market at 173.5 and 67.6, respectively. All right, lowest on this thing is Buckeye, still falling at 62.4, and Goodyear and Paradise Valley and Gilbert are our 3 biggest losers. We don't care about Paradise Valley, but let's look at Gilbert. They're down 15%, still in a seller's market, but there's Goodyear. 87.3, down 14%. And of course, you know where my listing's at, which is coming back on the market this weekend. So that one's going to be what we call a long, hard slog, like Fallujah in the desert, long, hard slog. So such is real estate. Speaking of real estate, let's talk about our holiday. Right? The person I want you to know of, and this is directly related to the 4th of July, and more importantly, the Declaration of Independence. All right, so for those of you people who were paying attention in school, all right, Declaration of Independence is when the colonies got together, had a series of meetings, wrote down a kiss-off letter to the king, and sent it off. But as described in the Declaration of Independence, hey, it's only polite if we tell you why you suck. And then they listed off a lot of things of why England at the time sucked, right? Or more importantly, the government at England as it applied to the colonies sucked. And they list a lot of things off. Now, you will notice when a lot of people are quoting the Declaration of Independence, they don't actually go down the list and talk about, judges and taxes and weird regulations and having to travel all the way to England to defend yourself in court or anything like that. And I got my opinions of why they don't want you, the poor little commoners out there, knowing these things, because you might go, hey, wait, isn't that yeah. So we're going to talk about one of the most famous phrases in the Declaration of Independence, and it comes in about the second paragraph or so, and I'm just going to read it for you verbatim. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All right? A lot of ink has been spilled over that phrase. All right? I'm going to go a little bit different direction on this, because a lot of people don't know exactly how the Declaration of Independence was written. It was not written by a committee. The first draft was indeed written by Thomas Jefferson. All right? And in the actions of all great writers, he stole a lot of stuff from a lot of other people. All right. That did not just flourish from his brow like Athena. All right. He actually just cribbed a lot off of other people's texts. All right. And we're going to talk about one of those here in a second. All right. But what also happened is once he had that whole thing written and he took it in and said, ta-da! Well, it got edited because it went to committee, and nothing survives contact with the committee. All right. It first went to the Committee of Five, which consisted of Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin. You guys might have heard of those two. And then a Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston, all right, who was apparently not a doctor and was not hanging out in Africa at the time. All right. They then went and edited it down. And then it went to another organization called the Committee of the Whole, which was the entire assembly, congressional assembly, and everybody had their own little say on it until finally they came up with a format that everybody was happy with, and they all signed it, some with larger print than others, looking at you, John Hancock, and it was said and done. Boom. Cue the fireworks. But the one person that people don't hear a lot about, who had a large impact on the Declaration of Independence, and specifically that phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was a gentleman by the name of John Locke, who was a philosopher, economist, general one of those powderhead wig guys who just hung out, and thought and wrote stuff down. Here's a picture of him right here, in case you guys wonder what he looked like. This is at the edge of his life, and I recognize that look. I recognize those brow ridges. That is what I call the WTF brow ridges. All right, they are endemic to my family. Take a look at my father, my sister's getting them. That's the look that you get when you look upon other mere mortals and go, what the? Yeah, we all got that, all right? But my God, that nose, that beak, wow, he is bringing that too. I mean, I think you'd call that a Roman nose, but I mean, that's his nose and his crown. He's partial Klingon here. Right. But what John Locke did is he thought up the basic concept of what he called natural rights, right? And this, these are, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And there's been some arguments around the corners of what is considered a natural right, rights that are endowed by your Creator, the rights that you get just by sucking air. Right? And he was the first one to write that down. Now, his original take on this, all right, is he actually considered private property a natural right. And so the original list was life, liberty, and property. Right? It was sometimes considered life, liberty, and equity or estate. Boy, I am such a 21st century guy. I just said as equity. Life, liberty, and estate, which basically means not a big house with a big lawn and everything like that. When we talk property, we're not talking real estate. We're talking the ownership of things. And it was Locke's belief that labor added to a raw material created value, and that ownership was given to the individual who actually put the labor into it. So you take a rock, all right, and you take another rock, and you spend 30 minutes sitting down there chipping one rock into another until you have something of value like a spear point, right? That is now your spear point, right? Because it was your labor put into it. One could even say that you gave a little bit of your life to that, because I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, boys and girls, all right? But you only have a finite amount of minutes in your lifespan. All right, the Grim Reaper comes for us all. All right, do not ask who the bell tolls for it tolls for thee. Hopefully more thou than thee, but hey, still. All right, and that was his argument on these things. All right, and the reason why it did not make it through committee, in fact, it didn't even make it through Jefferson. I'm sorry, I was reading a lot of LBJ last night and how people can just suddenly drop out of the middle of running for president, just going, yeah, I'm done, I'm out, I'm not going to win anyways. And don't ask me why that is suddenly, an issue to pay attention to this week, because this is not a political podcast. We're talking real estate and we're talking John Locke here. All right. So anyways, Jefferson was influenced by a guy named Rousseau. Rousseau was a French philosopher, and one of his founding beliefs was all inequality is based in possessions. All right, that you have and I don't. All right, what we call, nowadays I call that jealousy, but he thought that all inequality was basically built around the fact that some people have more than others. Right? And that did have an influence on Jefferson. It also had an influence on Benjamin Franklin. All right? In his position, yeah, you get to have property, but I get to tax it for the common good. Bet you didn't know that about old Ben Franklin. Not only was he one of the founding fathers and a complete man whore, all right, but he also, pretty pro-tax, right? So Locke wrote the original stating life, liberty, and property, all right? Jefferson comes in, modifies it, but we see the original Lockean, if that's a word, use of this, all right, in other documents of the time, like the Virginia Declaration of Rights, right? This was actually written, and it was adopted a month before the Declaration of Independence, right? On June 12, 1776, right? And this is where he speaks of happiness within a context of recognizably Lockean rights, and a word that I'm not even going to try to say, as the fundamental natural rights of all mankind. And in there, they list off, all right, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty, and the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Now, let's put this in context, because this is Virginia, which we call a southern state, and 100 years later, we'd be calling a Confederate state or a slave state, so you can see how those particular guys might really want to lean into the whole property, side of the argument, especially when what they considered property at the time, all right? But we also see this thing in other documents, all right, both written in use at the time. There's something called the Declaration of Colonial Rights, right, which is a resolution of the First Continental Congress, right? And it used the time life, liberty, and property. We see this used the older Canadian Bill of Rights before the commies took over, where they added the enjoyment of property. And in fact, the Canadian Charter of Rights has life, liberty, security of the person. All right, so, and ultimately, we still see this thing fundamentally in the use of the Fifth Amendment that says that you cannot be divested of your life, liberty, or property without due process, all right? They cannot just come in there and execute you or drone you, all right? Despite what recent court rulings and the actions of our 44th president of the United States, right? Everybody's running to Wikipedia trying to figure out who that one is. But you cannot, there needs to be a mechanism, and in certain cases, especially with eminent domain, you have to be made whole at the end of the day. All right, we see that in the Fifth Amendment. We see it reaffirmed in the 14th Amendment and then applied to the states. Remember, kids, that 14th Amendment means that if the feds can't do it, the states can't do it. All right, and that means, it was constantly coming up with the second and the fifth, and in certain cases, the first. All right, but that's what the 14th Amendment does for you all. So what does this mean? This guy right here, this old gentleman right here, came up with the very concept that, you have a right that is endemic to you at birth. All right. Various people will use the term endowed by their creator, okay, and in many cases in these old writings, even though we are always told this was a Christian nation, a lot of these guys were deists, right? A lot of these guys were closet agnostics. Some of them were just out and out atheists, but they did recognize that as a human being, you have these rights, right? And this gentleman right there was the first one to write that down, and you see that come across in the Declaration of Independence. All right, and then there's a whole list of reasons why in the rest of the Declaration of Independence of how the government of England was not, allowing those things to happen, right? And so on and so forth. So, honestly, that's the reason why we're dumping you. Now, I'm sure the last time you got broke up with, you did not have a huge letter written to you, or maybe you did. Maybe it happened on a text. Maybe it showed up as a late-night phone call when they knew your phone was going to be turned off. Who knows, right? But in this case, Declaration of Independence, clearly delineated it out. It's one of our founding documents. It colors and influences the entire Constitution. And this guy right here, life, liberty, and property. So, you want to have property? Go forth, take your labor, apply it to things, all right, and go and buy stuff. Buy a house, all right? Go down to Fry's, get one of those big boxes, all the little stuff that sparkles and whatnot. Light them up tomorrow. Eat your hot dogs at a higher expense than they were last year or the year before or the year before that. Drink some beer, American beer, Sam Adams for the win. Do one of these. Count all your fingers. Make sure when I see you next week, you have all those fingers and you're not looking like this. All right. Check your eyebrows. Make sure those are still going to be there. All right. And of course, with everything, we're watching our children or pets around fireworks. All right, don't worry about the dog. Dog's going to be underneath the bed. And next door is going to be sitting there with people whining and screaming about how their dogs are terrified of the fireworks. All right, yeah, we've been doing this since the dawn of time. And there's a reason why they eat dogs in areas where they shoot off a lot of fireworks. They get sick of them peeing on the rug. All right, but continue that. Work your circles, boys and girls. Don't drive in anything flooded. All right, I want you guys to have a safe holiday, great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys all next week.